What would you do if the person who protected you had been gone for years, but somehow still found a way to reach you? I was asleep. My husband was snoring next to me, and then I felt it, not heard it, felt it, like a cattle prod straight through my chest. I jolted awake, heart hammering, and I heard her voice, clear as anything. Open his phone. I didn't know yet what I was about to find. I didn't know it would unravel 5 years of a life I thought was real. I didn't know she'd been protecting me this whole time. Let me tell you how we got there. My grandmother was my best friend. She lived right next door to me my entire life. She was the kind of woman who was always positive, always kind, never talked badly about a single person, ever. A genuinely good time. The coolest lady I ever knew. And she was completely devoted to my grandfather. The love between them, I grew up watching it. My mom saw it too, and she built the same kind of marriage with my dad. So when I got married, that was my blueprint. That was the only template I knew. A love that was real and total and permanent. I had no reason to think mine was anything different. My husband and I had been together for 16 years. 3 kids, long weeks, a full, loud, chaotic, beautiful life. And through all of it, we were close, physically, emotionally. The people around us used the word goals. Even our therapist said it. Even our close friends. When my grandmother passed, my husband and I bought her house. 5 acres in Florida, right next door to my parents. My kids could walk next door to grandma's, just like I had as a child. It felt like fate, more than fate. It felt like something meant to happen. We moved in June 1st, 2024. We sleep in the same bedroom my grandparents slept in and died in. My grandmother used to tease me constantly about wanting me to have a third baby. She had 3 kids. My mom had 3 kids. And she was convinced I needed one more. I disagreed. Strongly. We were actually scheduling my husband's vasectomy that summer. What I didn't know was that I was already pregnant. 3 days after moving into her house. 3 days after Florida's new abortion law took effect. When I went to the clinic, I was 6 weeks and 3 days along. 3 days past the cutoff. My grandmother had gotten her way. I had my 3rd son in March 2025, and if you haven't noticed, there are a lot of 3s in this story. That was her favorite number. Her whole house was covered in Dale Earnhardt number 3 memorabilia because she loved him second only to my grandfather. She was particular about things she loved. I believe she was particular about me too. August 3rd, 2025. My husband and I had gone to bed like any other night. At some point, deep in sleep, I heard a notification go off on his phone. It wasn't his usual text sound. Something was slightly different about it. But I was half asleep, and I trusted him completely. Our phones had the same password. We could pick up each other's phone any time we wanted. We just never felt the need to. I closed my eyes, started drifting back. Then the second notification, and then the jolt. I don't have another word for it. Like a physical shock, straight through me, and I was wide awake with my heart pounding and the hair standing up on my arms, and heard her, my grandmother's voice, open his phone. I leaned over my sleeping husband and opened it. Right there on the screen, a free messaging app I didn't recognize, and inside it dozens and dozens of message threads. Women he'd been paying to meet, hidden apps, a secret credit card, account after account after account on platforms I'd never heard of, with a profile bio that described himself as happily married and looking for fun. driving directions in his maps that matched addresses I was finding in the messages. I stayed up until 3 in the morning when he had to get up for work. I went through everything, every thread, every address, every transaction. He knew the language of all of it like someone who had been doing it for a long time. When he woke up, I was sitting there waiting. I asked him, calmly, why he was cheating on me. His first reaction wasn't guilt. It wasn't remorse. It wasn't even denial. He insulted me, attacked me, blamed me. That sentence caused me to black out. Dissociative amnesia. I lost the next 3 days, but I know from what came after that, I was still in the house, still functioning in some stripped-down, mechanical way. And I know, because the timeline adds up, that I was still sleeping with him. He had told me nothing happened, that it was all just communication, that he never went through with any of it. And some broken, disoriented part of me believed him. I shouldn't have. Day 4. Or technically after midnight, so still the tail end of day 3. We were getting ready for bed like we had every night that week. And he called me into the bathroom, said something was wrong, that a painful rash had broken out that day, and he needed me to look at it. I walked in, and I screamed. He had a visible outbreak, blisters covering a wide area of his body. The unmistakable sign of a sexually transmitted infection he had been hiding from me. It took him a couple of hours to finally admit what I was looking at and what it meant, that he had been with other women, that I needed to get tested. I stopped sleeping with him that night. I got tested the next day, then again, then 2 more times after that. 4 tests total since that night in August. Everyone came back negative. I'm still in disbelief. Our doctor sent medication, and within 2 weeks the sores were gone. His subsequent blood work came back negative. I don't fully understand the medical explanation for what I saw with my own eyes. What I do understand is what it stopped. He had been planning to say nothing, to take it to the grave, while I was still in the dark, while our newborn was in the house, while I was still in his bed every night. Something woke me up in time, something that shouldn't have been able to. On August 20th, I woke up with an overpowering feeling that there was more, that this wasn't new, that someone with that much knowledge, that many accounts, that many routes memorized, wasn't a beginner. I sat him down. I told him to tell me about the last 5 years. I said it like I already knew what he was going to say. Even though I didn't, I had no idea where that number came from. He told me he had started cheating in 2021, 4 years before I found out. 4 years of my life inside a lie. And then I remembered something. In 2022, 1 year into his cheating, I had been diagnosed with a high-risk strain of HPV. I had assumed it was something dormant from before I'd met him, something I'd carried unknowingly for over a decade. And I had been living with that assumption ever since. Getting painful biopsies every 3 to 6 months to monitor for cervical cancer. Going through that alone, while he sat across from me and watched. He had watched me go through all of that. He had watched his own mother suffer the same diagnosis, the same consequence of his father's infidelity decades earlier. He had seen what this does to women, and he had kept going. There were no signs, no suspicious behavior I could point to. Not a single moment in 5 years where I felt something was wrong. We were still that couple, still hot and heavy, still every night. And then we moved into my grandmother's house. And within weeks it was over. All of it. exposed. Like the house itself had a rule about what was allowed inside it. After I found out, in those first few weeks, I reached a very dark place. Thoughts of disappearing entirely, of just being gone. What pulled me back was my newborn son. He needed me in a way that was completely clear and completely immediate, and that clarity cut through everything else. If it weren't for him, I'm not sure where I'd be. I mean that. I believe he was sent to me. I believe I know who sent him. My grandmother had 3 kids. My mom had 3 kids. I have 3 kids now. Conceived 3 days after I moved into her house, 3 days after the law changed. Born in the month of March. And if you need me to tell you what number March is, you already know. She got her 3rd grandchild, and that grandchild saved my life. And the night her voice woke me up, it saved me from something else entirely. I think about that phone notification, the one that made a slightly different sound. I almost didn't hear it. I almost went back to sleep. And then that jolt, that physical, unmistakable jolt, and her voice. 3 words. Open his phone. I don't know exactly what happens after we die. I don't think anyone does. But I know what I felt in that bed. I know what I heard. And I know what it stopped. She built a house of love, and she was not going to let it be destroyed. I'm still there. I'm going to stay. And I'm going to make it what she always wanted it to be. For my kids, the same way it was for me, with or without him. This story was shared on a popular online forum by someone who is still living inside it, still healing, still standing, still in that house, still grateful. If something about this got into you, the kind of thing that stays, this is the right place. Follow, so the next one finds you.